Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Eleanor Tomlinson. I'm a Chartered Educational and Child Psychologist and creator of the Sensory Self Card Sort resource. I'm here today to explain a little bit more about this resource and show you how you can use it in practice. I hope that it's going to be useful for yourselves as adults to understand more about young people's sensory worlds, whilst at the same time helping young people themselves make sense of these experiences and understand what accommodations they might need to help them navigate the world in a way that feels more comfortable for them. There are several reasons why I created this resource. I myself has worked as an educational psychologist for 16 years, and as part of that, we have to capture sensory needs in our statutory casework. We have to have some sort of understanding around how the sensory world is impacting our young people. At the same time, I've come to learn that sensory is an area that can be challenging for us to access the right support at the right time for. And as educational psychologists, it can be really difficult for us to find resources that are going to capture it in a way that is meaningful and timely for the young person. In addition to this, I work with a lot of schools who know the staff in schools are fully aware that there are some sensory differences going on for young people, but they haven't been too sure where to turn to get support for that. Whether that's support to understand or whether that's support in terms of strategies, it often leaves frontline staff feeling lost, feeling unsure about where they can turn to help them further a young person's understanding, reduce any barriers there might be to education, and help families make sense of what their young person is experiencing. The goal with Sensory Self was to have an accessible activity that is child-led and engaging for them. This is positioned as an activity that's suitable for any young person over the age of around about 8, so that they can understand what it is they're experiencing, understand the language as part of that, and take part in the activity in a way that they feel comfortable with. The cards themselves have clear first-person statements on them, and I'm going to be showing you some examples of those as we go through. They're also colourful and they have bespoke images. These images are of stick people, but these stick people also have expressions and they're designed to be colourful and engaging, as well as providing the dual coding to help young people have the verbal input at the same time as having a visual to support that. With Sensory Self, I find that young people have a real reflection on what their own experiences are. It enables them to think back over situations they've had in their life or contexts that they might be in and understand them differently. It also gives us as adults some learning opportunities around the environment that the young people are in and how that's intersecting with their sensory preferences. Together, I find that this leads to a co-production of strategies. Young people are usually very good at identifying what helps them, and our job as professionals a lot of the time is to listen to that, to elicit it in a safe way, to teach that young person to self-advocate and to try and create change in the environment, in the context around each young person as well. On this slide, you can see some examples of the sensory self cards. First up, we have the pink set, which is olfactory and smell. Smell can often be the source of sensory joy for young people. There are certain smells that they seek out, and when they smell them, they feel so much calmer and happier. It can also be the source of some distress for young people, whereby everyday smells that other young people are able to ignore or phase out, for some young people they are so strong and overwhelming that it can prevent them from accessing certain spaces or contexts. The next set is our yellow set, and that's for auditory and hearing. The example card you can see on the slide says, I prefer quiet spaces. Some young people really thrive in quiet spaces and take themselves away from too much noise or hustle and bustle, whilst others work better when there's loud noise around them and maybe they have music on really loud to help them focus, or they create a lot of noise themselves. Our next set is the green set, and this is about tactile and touch. The example card here says, I don't like the feeling of some clothes. This is a very common experience for a lot of our young people and often leads to really in-depth discussion about the kind of fabrics that they do and don't like. Other questions in there revolve around unexpected touch or touch that they might seek out in forms of hugs from others or perhaps things like weighted blankets as well. Our next set is the blue set, and this looks at the visual domain or sight. The example card here says, I often wear sunglasses because daylight feels too bright. In conversation with young people, they might not always agree that they wear sunglasses to manage this. However, it might lead to a discussion about the lights in school or in other settings that they might find too bright. Or often we talk about their home environment and where within their home they prefer the lighting and what it's like in their own bedroom. We also think about the visual elements of different spaces, like their bedroom or classrooms. Do they prefer there to be lots of things on the walls for them to look at, or do they prefer plain, calm spaces? The last of our sets on this page is the orange set, and that's gustatory and taste. These 5 senses are the most commonly known ones, and they form the main part of our sensory experiences as we know them in everyday life. For gustatory and taste, the example card says, I like strong flavours, for example, spicy or sour. I often end up in conversations with young people about the foods that they enjoy and whether they eat them over and over again, or whether there are particular tastes or textures that they avoid even just by looking at them. Next up, we have our grey set, and this is interoception, about our internal body signals and how our brain receives those messages. The example on the card in the picture is, people tell me my clothes don't match the weather. And the rest of the set explores things like temperature, needing the toilet, hunger and fullness signals. Next up we have the purple set, and this is proprioception or body awareness. The example in the picture says, it's hard for me to control my writing or drawing. This can explore things like accidentally breaking things by using too much force as another example. With proprioception, often our brains don't quite tell us exactly how much force to use. We might shut a door and it accidentally slams without meaning to. And so it's really helpful for young people to reflect on this sense. It might be something that they've never considered before. We then have the red set. The red set is vestibular, which is all about balance and movement. The example card says, I find it hard to sit still. Again, a lot of young people aren't aware of this sense. They don't know that this is what's happening for them. And through this set, they explore things such as motion sickness and whether they get sick on swings or rides or in the car, whether they need a lot of movement, whether they need to fidget a lot of the time, whether they lose their balance. There's lots of things within that domain that open up so many different conversations and help young people understand their sensory world better. Finally, the black set isn't a sensory domain. It's not related to sensory in the same way as the others are. Rather, it's related to the context, the school environment. This allows conversations to open up about how their sensory world intersects with the different environments that they find themselves in, and in particular the school environment. The card here says, corridors can be too busy for me. Often it's this black set that can lead to conversations about change and strategies that they might find helpful, or accommodations from a school which will make it easier for them to manage their sensory needs. Here we have the final section of the Sensory Self Card Resource Pack. What you see in front of you are the different conversational prompts that can really open up those conversations. So we have some of the category headers. We have this is not like me, this is sometimes like me, and this is like me. And I use those, putting them out on the table and asking the young people to sort cards under each of those headers. In addition to those, we have 4 conversation prompts. We have the one I like the most. This is a really important question. Young people may have sensory differences, but they might not experience them as being bad things. There might be their sensory joys, the things that they really, really like, and they want to have the opportunity to discuss that. We then have the one I'd most like to change. and this can lead to a conversation about the context in which certain sensory preferences become a barrier. We then have the card with the biggest impact on my life, and this might be the one that's present all of the time, or one when it is present, it's a really big deal and a really big issue for them. And then we finally come on to what strategies help you the most. And this is where that co-production comes in. This is usually the card that I end on when I'm using this with young people, so that we can think together about the strategies we've already talked about, and if there's anything else we think of that might help them, we can make a note of that and see if there's a way of getting that implemented for them. Now that you've seen what the card set looks like and the different sensory domains that they cover with the language that they use, I was hoping to spend some time now to explain to you how you might use the Sensory Self card sort. Firstly, on the box, which looks like this, you can see there is a QR code on the side. If you scan that QR code, it will take you to the website. And on the website, I've put a resource with some hints and some tips on to support you to use those. In that section, you'll see some scripts that you might use to explain it to young people, and some things to bear in mind about how long the session might take and how you might structure that. On that page, I've also given an explanation of each of the sensory domains and what they might look like, as well as some strategies. On the screen in front of you, you can see a screenshot of the website. You can see the opening screen that it takes you to when you scan that QR code with the how to use guide. And then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, there's an example on the screen of the sensory strategy summary sheet. Just to say, at this point in time, this is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all approach for sensory. I wanted to put something on there to guide you in the right direction of some strategies that you might want to consider. However, it's really important that these are co-produced with that young person and with their family as well, of what might work for them and what might not. As part of the section, I'm trying to help you understand how you might use the Sensory Self sort cards. I wanted to share a case example with you. The example I'm going to share with you, I've changed his name so that I'm going to call him Jasper, and he is a Year 10 student in one of my secondary schools. Jasper is a wonderful young man. He's currently on the waiting list for autism and has been for several years, and it doesn't look like that assessment is going to happen anytime in the near future. He attended the school during years 7 and 8 with increasing anxiety. He was offered the option to attend an alternative provision for mental health and emotional well-being needs. However, at that point opted to be home educated. This meant that he spent most of year 9 out of education and decided to return just before the summer holidays because he wanted to work towards his GCSEs. Jasper was wonderful to work with. He was really conversational and gave me some real insights into his world. As you can see in the picture in front of you, he was very neat and very precise with how he arranged these cards. He was sat directly in front of the table as you see it, and I was sat to the side of him. I would read out the statement of the card and hand it to him, and he would then decide where to place it. As you can see, he really took his time to think about each of these answers, and it mattered a lot to him that they looked neat and they looked tidy, and he didn't like it if they weren't in order or didn't come together in a way that he felt comfortable with. Sometimes from using this resource, I can get so much information about a young person in other ways, such as their processing time, or I might also be looking at their conversational skills, their preference with organisation, which is the case here with Jasper. What I'm going to do on the next few slides is talk through what I learned from the way that he had sorted these cards and show you how I wrote this up to share that information with the key adults around him. We're then also going to look at some of the strategies that I recommended to support him in school. Each of the sensory domains, I had a look at how he sorted the cards, and it's not as simple as looking at all the ones that he put under this is like me and all of the ones that he put under this is not like me, and making simple on the surface readings of each of those, because some of the cards fit in the opposite domain, and that was done to help really ensure there was reliability and validity to each of the statements and prevent students just putting everything in one category. So for Jasper, with his auditory needs, what I learned was that he was highly sensitive to noise and he really prefers quiet and calm environments. He struggled with busy auditory settings, and he described to me that computing in particular felt overwhelming. He consistently uses loop earplugs, and occasionally he's unaware of his own vocal volume. Before I had collected Jasper to do this work, I had observed him in an art lesson. This was a really quiet classroom, and about halfway through the teacher put on some classical music, which didn't seem to impact him either, because throughout that entire session he had loop earplugs in. He kept the loop earplugs in whilst we were working together, again, even though we were in a quiet space and there wasn't any background noise. I could see already that auditory was going to be an area that had an impact on him. He was really good at describing this to me and could explain how in different contexts he likes noise to be different, and describe gaming, that actually he has his gaming on quite loud, but that's because he wears noise reducing headphones to help manage the flow of that auditory input. Next up is olfactory, and I learnt that he was both smell sensitive and smell seeking. He avoids stronger unpleasant smells to him, and described the canteen as being one of those, but also sought out preferred scents, naming petrol and a particular cologne that his stepdad wears. For gustatory, Jasper showed strong taste and texture sensitivities, and he preferred predictable foods. He seeks intense flavours like spicy and sour, although these need to be very strong for him to register them. He talked about a particular sour sweet that he's been having for so long now that it's not sour enough, it's almost like he's got used to it and he's trying to find something more intense to really provoke that sense. Next up was proprioception, and Jasper benefits from deep pressure and heavy work. He might misjudge force sometimes, and he finds writing or drawing difficult in terms of controlling the pen, and he occasionally bumps into or spills things. He also noted that proprioceptive input seems to support his regulation, and so this seemed to be having quite a big impact on his sensory world as well. Under vestibular, it was clear that movement was regulating for Jasper. He had a particularly self-regulating movement, which was to twist his hair, and he could name that himself, that he uses that to help him manage that domain. He struggles with balance sometimes and also finds sports difficult. Under tactile, he could name that there are a lot of textures that he dislikes in terms of clothing fabrics. He is selective about how he accepts touch from others, and he uses chewing and fidgeting to support his regulation. With interoception, he had inconsistent awareness of his internal body signals, and it seemed like that was affecting his emotional and behavioural regulation. And there wasn't anything significant that came through from his visual sensory domain exploration. From using the black card set, which was about the school environment, I learned that busy corridors and high demand sensory environments were overwhelming for him. Jasper preferred quiet break spaces, which he had found to be near the music department, and he'd sit with some of his peers there to take that rest break. He also benefited from predictable seating and from visual structure in lessons. Using the sensory self card resort with Jasper was only one part of a much larger assessment that I carried out with him. However, that led to these three particular interpretation marks for him. The first one was that his sensory processing differences were significantly affecting his ability to engage comfortably in school environments. Secondly, that auditory sensitivity and interoceptive differences may contribute to fluctuations in school attendance. And thirdly, that attention and regulation needs, as also indicated by the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, were interacting with sensory loads, and that was influencing his overwhelm. On this slide, you can see some of the strategies that I recommended for supporting Jasper in his school environment. As I mentioned, this wasn't the full assessment, but it was part of it. And the strategies that I felt linked most directly with using the sensory self-card resort are the ones that I've put on your screen. So feel free to pause them now if you would like to read those in more detail. Thank you so much for listening to this webinar and learning about the sensory self-card resort. If there's anything else that you would like to know about it, I've put a QR code on the screen that if you scan that, it should take you straight to the website, and there's more information should you need it there. Thank you very much.